L'chaim, everybody. What are we all making l'chaim on?
Water.
L'chaim on water. L'chaim, everybody, to Yud Aleph Nissan, to the Rebbe's birthday, to a special Farbrengen, to taking upon ourselves good decisions the way the Rebbe would want from us on a special and auspicious day like this. I want to give a special thanks to Rabbi Kesselman for inviting me here to Farbrengen and to the entire community for this tremendous zechus. We should celebrate many simchas together. L'chaim. L'chaim.
It's recorded.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
So when I was a young child, I was living in Johannesburg, South Africa. And we used to wake up at 3:30 or 4:30 in the morning to hear live streamings of the Rebbe's Farbrengens. When the Rebbe Farbrengen in New York, it was 9:30 at night. In South Africa, we don't change the clock. So that's either 3:30 or 4:30 in the morning. And on many occasions, we were able to hear these Farbrengens basically live. Now, I use the word streaming, of course. I'm talking to you about 1985, 1986, 1987, 1988. After that, really, there were not weekday Farbrengens. After the Rebbe Chaim Mushka passed away in, I think, January of 1988, after that, the Rebbe did not Farbreng during the week in public anymore. The Rebbe said many siches, but no more Farbrengens. Farbrengens after that were only on Shabbos, which of course there was no way to hear those live. But there were siches anyways. But I remember from before that, I remember hearing these Farbrengens, participating in these Farbrengens while they were going on live. So let's say in 1986, I was about 9 years old approximately, and my father would wake me up 2:30, 3:30 in the morning. We would get dressed in Shabbos clothes. We would go to what was then called the Central Chabad House of Johannesburg, and there through the telephone we were able to hear the Rebbe's Farbrengens. I remember people sitting and taking notes. I remember it was a very festive atmosphere. It was really, really something. In fact, there are times later on, I learned that there were times when the Rebbe would make note of the fact that there are people who were physically present, in the room where he was speaking, and there were people who were hearing the Farbrengen live in other places. Now, there was no internet, or at least it was not available to the masses in those days. So we listened to the Rebbe's Farbrengens through the telephone. There was a phone line, a phone connection, and it would be broadcast, through speakers, in a shul, in a Chabad house, and this is the way it went. I do remember that on occasion, the line would get cut off. Again, this is, for those of us who were around in those days, not foreign concepts. At the time the line would get cut off, we would, quote, lose the connection, and then after a couple of minutes it would come back. Sometimes we would miss pieces of what the Rebbe said. And actually these hookups, we call them hookups. Today you got to be careful with these expressions. But actually they were pretty expensive. Because phone calls in those days were expensive. What can I tell you, my dear friends? It was a different time. So this particular story takes place, and if I shared this with you before, I'm sorry. I'm repeating it anyways because I love the story very much. So this particular story took place with what was called a surprise Farbrengen. Surprise Farbrengen means that the Rebbe would not tell people. I don't believe they happened often, but there were occasions where the Rebbe would Farbreng without people knowing in advance. Sometimes a few people knew in advance, sometimes nobody knew in advance. And the Rebbe would, at 9:30 at night, put his holy siddur under his holy arm, and in his Shabbos kapota would march downstairs into the main room of 770, where nobody was ready and nothing was set up. 9:30 at night. Maybe there were a couple of students sitting and studying. Maybe there was a couple of people davening in the background. But, if you've been to 770 on a regular Tuesday, when we're not expecting much, not set up for a Rebbe's Farbrengen. And the Rebbe would stand there until somebody would bring him a chair to sit down. And then, in the Rebbe's, what can we say, inimitable style, Kedarkoi Bakodesh. As soon as they brought him a chair, no microphone, no recording, no crowd, nobody present, nothing set up, no l'chaim, no negunim, barely anybody in the room. Hi, how are you? Barely anybody in the room. You muted the phone. And now your wife hung up. She's definitely going to blame me. She didn't, it was muted. And the Rebbe, as soon as they brought him his chair, the Rebbe would sit down and start talking. And there would be a lot of chaos, till people would come and gather the chairs and the benches and sit and all the rest of it. Anyways, one year it happened that it was Yud Aleph Nissan, and the Rebbe surprised Farbrengt without telling anybody that he was going to Farbreng beforehand. Comes there exactly as I described. Sits down and starts talking. Now what happens when the Rebbe starts talking is that they start calling all over the world to let people know that the Rebbe is Farbrenging. So they call the people in Kfar Chabad. They tell them there's a surprise Farbrengen. Nobody knew that this was going to happen. And the Rebbe is talking. Come, gather all the people together in Kfar Chabad, gather them together so that they can come and hear the Rebbe speak. All right. Anybody know anything about Israelis? They're interesting people. You wake up Israelis at 3:30, 3 o'clock in the morning for a surprise Farbrengen. You're not going to catch them in their optimum state. But the Rebbe is Farbrengen. So everybody wakes up. This is, I don't know if I mentioned this. This was a Yud Aleph Nissan surprise Farbrengen. Based on my limited understanding, it would have had to have been sometime in the early 70s. Surprise Farbrengen. They drive around, they wake everybody up. The men get up, they go to the mikveh, they come to shul. All right, the Rebbe's Farbrengen. Let's hear the Farbrengen. So, they call United States of America 770, where there is a room, till this day actually, you can go and see it, where they have the central headquarters of the dissemination all around the world of the Rebbe speaking live. And they cannot get a phone connection to 770. And the room is filling up, more and more people coming. And the tension in the room starts to rise. Everybody's getting agitated. We're here to hear the Rebbe speak. No connection. No connection, no connection, no connection. They keep trying. Early 1970s, the phone system in Eretz Yisrael was probably not in its optimum state either, and the Olam is getting irritated. Until somebody says, well, if we're not going to hear the Rebbe speak, let's go back to bed. Let's go back to sleep. So that we can catch a couple of hours of Z, couple of days before Pesach, the men need all the energy they can muster to help their wives prepare for Pesach by leaving the house and staying out of the house all day. It takes a lot of energy to stay out of the house and out of the way all day. So we need our sleep. Let's just go home. In shul, in the room, was a chassid by the name of Reb Zusha Vilimovsky. Reb Zusha Vilimovsky was a very special, warm Hasidic Jew. He didn't go anywhere unless it was Pesach. He didn't go anywhere without a bottle of mashka in his hand. And he used to say about himself that he was a Gilgal, that he was a reincarnation of Reb Zusha from the times of the Mezritcha Magid, the original Reb Zusha Ma'anapoli. Reb Zusha Vilimovsky said he's a Gilgal of, how did he know? I don't know. He was like, we would call them like a Baal Shemske Yid. He did stuff that was, not the regular run-of-the-mill kind of chassid. Very special guy. Everybody loved him. So when he saw that people are getting agitated and irritated, he wanted to calm the crowd, or at least entertain them, or at least buy time. So he goes to the front of the room with his bottle of mashke in hand, like this, claps on the table. He says, everybody, I want to tell you a vort. Now, who's interested in listening to speeches in general? Nobody. Speeches at 3:30 in the morning? Also not. When you want to hear the Rebbe speak and it's not going through and somebody else is volunteering to speak, for sure not. And b'chlal, the crowd is already irritated, But got a captive audience. Nobody's going anywhere yet. They're waiting for the connection. And he's there, and he's got a bottle of mashke in hand, and he says, I'm going to tell you a vort. All right, what's the vort? He says, we say in the Haggadah, Ilu kervonu lifnei har Sinai, v'loi nosan lanu es haTorah, dayenu. If Hashem had brought us to Har Sinai and not given us the Torah, that would be enough. And Reb Zusha says, to tell you the truth, the commentaries on the Haggadah have a very hard time with it. How can a Jew say such a thing? It would be enough for us if Hashem had brought us to Har Sinai and not given us the Torah? Really? That would be okay? Dayenu? So it means, you know how the rabbis start? It doesn't mean this. It means it would be enough for us to thank Hashem. It means, I read an interesting pshat this year. It means that not that Hashem wouldn't give us the Torah. He wouldn't give us the Torah at Har Sinai. He would give us the Torah somewhere else. A pshat. It means that Hashem would do it some other way because we already had the Torah, because we already knew the mitzvahs. It says yes, but it means, ever studied Gemara? It says yes, but it means no. In fact, it doesn't just mean no, it means no with a capital N. So why does it say yes? Because the author had a little bit of extra ink, and yes is 3 letters, and no is 2 letters, so he wrote it that way. But maybe it's a print. It means 1,000 other things, but it's not what it says. It says, if Hashem had brought us to Har Sinai and didn't give us the Torah, dayenu, would be enough. So what does it mean? Now nobody's interested in his question or in his answer, right? But he's still talking. We're familiar with the sensation. He says, I'll tell you what it means. It means that if you come to a Farbrengen of the Rebbe, which is like Har Sinai, and you don't get the Torah, because you don't hear the connection. There is no connection. You don't hear the Rebbe speak. Instead of getting frustrated and getting upset, and instead of going home and going back to sleep, stay at Har Sinai, even though you're not receiving the Torah, dayenu. It's enough just to come to the Farbrengen, even if you don't hear the Rebbe speak. Dayenu. Nobody get upset, nobody go back to sleep, everybody stay here. That's my vort. Nobody cares. So what? Good vort, bad vort, who cares? But within a few minutes, the connection comes through. Now, this is the way the story is printed. When the connection came through, the Rebbe was in the middle of saying a mimer. And within very short time, through the connection comes through, they hear over the loudspeaker, because now the Rebbe's voice is blaring through the room, through the shul. They hear the Rebbe say these words. The Rebbe says, Al pi kol anal means based on everything that was explained until now, which the Hasidim have no idea what that is, right? Because they haven't heard anything. We can now explain something very puzzling that is written in the Haggadah. And the Rebbe says, it says in the Haggadah, Ilu kervanu lifnei Har Sinai v'loi nasan lanu es haTorah, that if Hashem had brought us to Har Sinai and didn't give us the Torah, dayenu, it would be enough. And the Rebbe says the Meforshim, the commentaries, they struggle to explain this. What does it mean? We'd be okay with Hashem not giving us the Torah? How do we even let those words out of our mouths? Says the Rebbe, but based on everything that was explained, we now have an explanation according to Chassidus. Now, to tell you the truth, before I tell the story in public, I should probably find the mimer, look it up, see what the Rebbe's explanation is, and then tell it to you. But I didn't do any of those, so I don't know what the Rebbe's explanation is. But I do know that the Rebbe explained it according to Chassidus. Ilu kervanu lifnei Har Sinai v'leinosan lanos haTorah. Maybe Har Sinai is Har Sinai is a godly revelation that the Jewish people experienced even without getting the Torah, and even that itself is worth so much. Dayenu. The Rebbe finishes the Maimer, and the Hasidim start singing, as is customary after the Maimer. All right, one more part of the story. So the entire adult male population of Kfar Chabad surrounds Reb Zusha. Reb Zusha, they tell him, Kum taicha por pech. You deserve a Hasidic beating, delivered with lots of love, kind of like our attitude on Miftzayim, in your face, down your throat, Judaism with a smile. So lots of love, but a Hasidic beating nevertheless. What's the matter? We have a rule, they tell him, Hasidim don't make miracles. Hasidim are not allowed to make miracles. Even if they have the ability to make miracles, this is the rule. Rebbe-Chassid relationship. Only a Rebbe makes miracles. If a Chassid has the ability to do so, he or she has to conceal this ability. Nobody may know about it, and definitely may not be used. You want a bracha, go to the Rebbe. You want a miracle, go to the Rebbe. I don't know if this is true, but it's been told that that somebody once needed a shidduch, and the Rebbe told him, go to Reb Zusha. So the guy comes to Reb Zusha, he says, I need a shidduch for my daughter. The Rebbe sent me to you. Reb Zusha says, I'm not a shadchan. Why did the Rebbe send you to me? What? I don't make shidduchim. Why did the Rebbe send you to me? So he thought for a minute. He said, probably because the Rebbe wants to do a miracle, wants to do something like, beyond the pale of nature. And he's looking for like a broom to use to sweep the floor. So it's going to be me. So I'm going to have to make some Reb Zusha shtick, and the shidduch will happen. So he says, how old's your daughter? Whatever. He says, I don't know how old she was, 20, 21, 22. He says, how old do you want the young man to be? He says, maybe around 24, 25. He says, and how tall do you want him to be? And what color hair do you want? And what color eyes? And what should he do for a living? Anyways, he asks him a bunch of questions, and he gets the profile of what he wants. He says, you know what? I'm not a shadchan. If the Rebbe sent you to me, must be there's we're gonna do this in some l'mayla miderach hateva way. He says to the guy, he says, let's go to the yeshiva. In Kfar Chabad, there's a yeshiva. I learned there for a few years. Let's go to the yeshiva. All right, so they go to the yeshiva, they get there. Rabbi Zusha says, you know what? We'll stand by the door. The first person who comes out, we'll give him Shalom Aleichem. We'll see what happens. They stand there for a minute. A young man walks out. Rabbi Zusha says, Shalom Aleichem. Aleichem Shalom. How old are you? 24. How tall are you? Exactly the right height. What do you do for a living? I'm a doctor. I'm a dentist. I'm a, orthopedic surgeon. I don't know. What do people do for a living? Whatever. I'm an accountant. Nobody does that anymore, right? Whatever. The guy, Reb Zusha says to the guy, are you interested in a shidduch? He says, yeah. He says, would you consider, going out with a girl from wherever she was from a Lubavitcher family? He says, yeah. He says, if the father of the girl were around right now, would you speak to him? Yeah. He turns around, he says, Shalom Aleichem, meet your new father-in-law, meet your new son-in-law, Mazel Tov, and apparently the shidduch came to be. So, what are you saying?
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I'll tell you what. This is a Farbrengen is a very powerful time. I don't know if this particular story is true, but the Farbrengen has power. So let's make a special l'chaim. In the schus, we're talking about on the Rebbe's birthday, we're talking about some great chassidim. A bracha for everybody who needs a special bracha. Who needs a bracha for gesund, Hashem should bless us all with gesund. And who needs a bracha for shidduchim, Hashem should bless us with shidduchim. And needs a bracha for Yiddish chassidus anaches, Hashem should bless us all with Yiddish chassidus anaches. And parnasa, bagashmias, baruchnias. For alle Yidden, atzlocha, gesund, parnasa, ashirus, mefloga, and all the most wonderful brachas in the schus of this powerful day, l'chaim. Anyways, they surround Reb Zusha. They say, Reb Zusha, a chos is not allowed to make miracles. You were going to give you a parpech. Rabbi Zusha says you can patch me from today till tomorrow, no problem. Ain't nothing that hasn't been patched before. But if you think I did a miracle, you're all out of your minds. He said, I did a miracle. I did nothing. I just told you a stupid vart. A stupid vart, a smart vart. I told you a vart that nobody was interested in. The Rebbe did the miracle. The Rebbe wants us to know that we can now, at this point, hear what he's saying. The Rebbe wants us to know that the connection is now coming through. So the Rebbe picked up where we left off to tell us that from now on the connection is alive and working and being manifest. The miracle is all the Rebbe's. That's the story. All right. Why do I think it's relevant to today? I'll tell you why. Because in many ways today, we feel like a situation where it's Kervonu Lifnei Har Sinai, V'loi Nosan Lanu Es HaTorah. We would want to celebrate Yud Aleph Nissan with the Rebbe Farbrengen, with the Rebbe speaking to us, with the Rebbe telling us what it is that he wants us to do, which campaigns, which projects, which initiatives. We would want to be able to hear that. We don't hear that in a physical sense. So what do? We come to Har Sinai, we gather together at a Farbrengen for the Rebbe's birthday, and we daven, and we sing, and we repeat things that we were zeicha to hear or to learn from the Rebbe. And we say, okay, Rebbeinu Shalom, here we are, right? All of the Hasidim, we're gathered at the foot of the mountain. We're ready for our Moshe Rabbeinu to come down and bring us the Torah from Hashem and tell us, here's what it is. In the meanwhile, we don't hear it. But somewhere, the Rebbe sits and listens to every single Yud Aleph Nissan Farbrengen. And somewhere the Rebbe sits and hears, what are the Chassidim saying? How are they planning to celebrate this Yud Aleph Nissan? How are they going to inspire themselves, each other? What message are they going to take from this? I'll tell you something very interesting that I was reading a lot about lately. You know, the Rebbe hated gifts. You know about this? The Rebbe did not like gifts. He would quote the pasuk, "Soinei matonos yichye." He who despises gifts shall live. The next time you forget your wife's birthday or anniversary, quote this Farbrengen. Tell them, "Soinei matonos yichye." If it doesn't work, don't call me. But anyways, Soinei matonos yichye. The Rebbe would quote this pasuk. A person who hates gifts shall live. They once bought the Rebbe a new car. The Rebbe rejected it. He said, take it back. He wanted his old car back. The only exception was Yud Aleph Nissan. Not only did the Rebbe accept gifts, not only did the Rebbe express public appreciation and gratitude for the gifts, but the Rebbe actually, on occasion, announced what he wanted his gift to be, and sometimes asked people to prepare in advance for what it was that they were going to give him as a gift for Yud Aleph Nissan. Every chassid has to add, this is an amazing concept. Now, what did the Rebbe want? I'll give you a little hint, right? He didn't want new cars, and he didn't want houses, and he didn't want anything material. The Rebbe would say, I want the chassidim to bring me gifts for Yud Aleph Nissan. Number one was always Torah learning, always, number one. Nigla and Chassidus, the revealed sections of Torah and Chassidus. Number two, to build institutions, to build moistus, Chabad houses, centers. Number three, of course, to have an impact on another Yid. These were the gifts that the Rebbe wanted, accumulated, and collected. Asked for it, expressed appreciation for it, would have people prepare for it, everything. So now comes a Yud Aleph Nissan, the 121st, right? We start saying, Kapitel Kuf Chav Beis, Yud Aleph Nissan. Now every chassid has to say, okay, I got to bring the Rebbe a gift for Yud Aleph Nissan. Something in the number of 121. Either to get 121 people to put on tefillin, to spend 121 hours studying the Rebbe's Torah, to have an impact on 121 people, to give $121,000 to Chabad of Beverly Hills within the first 6 months of the year. A gift for what? Miracles. If only it were that easy, right? Where's Rebbe Zusha when we need him? And the Rebbe looks And the Rebbe looks to every chassid and says, okay, now I'm waiting to hear from you. What is it that you're gonna give? Now you know what happens in Chassidus. We're taught about bittul. Bittul means to be humble and self-nullification. So we abuse the bittul concept and go, me? I should give the Rebbe a gift? I'm a nothing and a nobody and I'm insignificant. The Rebbe needs my gift. What can I contribute? The Rebbe is the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation, and I'm probably like a piece of dirt stuck to his shoe that he wishes he could just get rid of if he stomped hard enough. I'm going to bring him something for his birthday? So there's one more pshat. Listen to this. One more pshat. Ilu kervonu lifnei ar Sinai v'lo nosan lanu es haTorah. You know, the Gemara says that the rabbis were once arguing. It happened once. The rabbis were once arguing about a halacha. Rabbi Lezer against the Chachamim. Story in Gemara Bava Metzia. Rabbi Lezer said, I'm right, and I'll prove it to you, because the carob tree outside the Beis Medrash will start doing the kazatzka. And that will prove that I'm right. They look outside, the carob tree does the kazatzka. 100 amos, 400 amos. The rabbi said, come on, a carob tree doesn't know the halacha, doesn't prove anything. Amasamayim yoichiach, Rabbi Lezer says, the river of water next to the Beis Medrash will prove my point. So the river of water starts flowing in the opposite direction. The Chachamim say, that doesn't prove anything. Koislei Beis Medrash, she says, the walls of the shul will prove that I'm right. Right? So the walls of the shul start to collapse. The Gemara says Rabbi Yeshua shouted at the walls to not get involved in rabbinic disputes. Walls, mind your own business. So the walls stayed halfway suspended. They didn't collapse, they didn't stand up. Rabbi Eliezer gets frustrated because he knew he was right. He says, all right, my dear brothers, I have no choice. Let the Rabbeinu Shalom in heaven testify to the fact that I'm right. Now imagine, just think about this for a second. Imagine you and I are arguing, right? And I say to you, I'll prove to you that I'm right. You know how? Hey, God, if you don't mind just chiming in here for a second, could you settle the score here for us? Just tell them Kesselman's right and the rest of them don't know what they're talking about. Remember the story? A bas koil came out min hashamayim and said, why are you arguing with Rabbi Eliezer? Shehalocha kamoisoi b'chol mokaim. The halacha is always like him. Always. Why are you arguing? Ne'emad Rabbi Yeshua al Raglov. Rabbi Yeshua stood up on his feet and said, Ein mashgichin bebas koil. We don't care about the bas koil. Mind your own business, God. And hey, great job in the Grand Canyon. Everything else, not important. When rabbis argue, your opinion is not relevant. Torah loy bashamayim hi. And they paskin the halacha, not like Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer refused to accept it, they put him in chayrim. Big deal, God said you're right. So what? Who's asking God? Rabbis are arguing here, right? Have some respect. Concludes the Gemara. One day, Reb Nosson met Eliyahu Hanavi. And he says to him, you know, because when you meet Eliyahu Hanavi, it's a good opportunity to ask questions, intriguing questions, right? Like important ones. He says to Eliyahu Hanavi, there's a burning question in my kishkis. I've always wanted to know, how did the Rebbeinu Shalom, how did the Eibashter react when the rabbi said, we don't think God's opinion is important. We don't care about the Basko. The Torah says, Loi Bashamayim hi. The Torah says, Achari Rabbim Lahatos. The Torah says you have to follow the majority, and the majority say not like Rabbi Eliezer. What did the Eibashter say about that? Eliyahu Hanavi said, the Eibashter laughed, and he said, Natzchuni bonai, Natzchuni bonai. My children have been victorious over me. That means, Hashem says, Rabbi Eliezer is right. But Hashem also says, You have to follow the opinion of the majority. And if most of the Chachamim say Rabbi Eliezer is not right, then the halacha is not like Rabbi Eliezer. The opinion of the Chachamim, the way the Chachamim understand it, that becomes the halacha. Now listen to this. Now let's review the words again. Ilu kervanu lifnei har Sinai v'loi nosan lonu es haTorah. Means what? Hashem could have brought us to Har Sinai. He could have given us the Torah, but not given it to us, not made us the balabatim over it. The Rebbeinu Shalom could have come down to Har Sinai and said, listen, it's my Torah, it's my Chochmah. You study it, you learn it, you practice it, but always remember, Hashem could have said, that the Torah belongs to me. That would have been wonderful. We would be very appreciative. In fact, we would have said, Dayenu. That's not what happened. Instead, the Eibishter brought us around Har Sinai and said, the Torah used to be mine, now it's yours. Now you tell me, how do you understand the Torah? And if you, the Chachamim and the Jewish people, the majority of you understand that the halacha should be kach v'kach, that's the halacha. Because you think so. Even so to speak, if I Hashem don't think so. Apshat. Ilu kervanu lifnei har Sinai v'loi nasan lanu es haTorah. If Hashem hadn't actually given it to us and made it ours, we would still be appreciative, we would still say dayenu, we would still have the Torah, but it wouldn't be ours. Now Hashem says, it's yours. When a Jew takes it and learns it, there's a sense of ownership, there's a sense of responsibility that you have. The way our minds understand it, this becomes Torah. So now the Rebbe looks at every single one of us and says, okay, it's your Aleph Nissan. And the Rebbe gave us chassidus, and the Rebbe gave us inspiration, and the Rebbe gave us leadership and guidance and letters and books and stories and vertelach and ideas and mission statements and campaigns and dollars and coins and hours and hours and hours of his time. I don't know if there's another Godel B'Yisrael in Jewish history who spoke as much and taught as much and shared as much and gave as much of himself and of his time for 40 plus years. Okay. And we look and we say, the Rebbe gave us so much. Amazing. Yes, and the Rebbe says, and now here's the point. Now comes your Aleph Nissan, and the Rebbe says, and now I'm giving it to you. Now every single one of us who stand at the Rebbe's Har Sinai and have learned a little bit, even a touch of the Rebbe's Torah, have to now take that and say, Torah loy b'shamayim hi. The Torah is no longer in the heavens. It's the inspiration, the chassidus, the Torah, it's no longer just the Rebbe's. He gave it to us. Now we say, me? But I have a Yetzer Hara. But I have limitations. But I have hang-ups. I'm still caught up in I have my own pettiness. Right? If you don't believe me, ask the people who know me. With all our pettiness and with all our challenges, we are the Rebbe's chassidim, us, standing at Har Sinai. It's to every one of us and to every Yid and every chassid and every person that gets touched by the Rebbe in one form or another, and through us to every single Yid in the world. It's to every one of us that the Rebbe says, okay, I'm taking my Torah, like every Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation, and I'm giving it to you. Now you're in charge. Now you own it. Now you have to take it and make it meaningful. Inspire yourself. Inspire someone else. The longer it goes, the stronger it has to get, and the more intense it has to get. So I'm going to challenge myself this Yud Aleph Nissan to take upon myself a hachlota, something to do with the number 121. I have to think about exactly what. Something with 121. And I hope that the Rebbe will accept my gift, because I give it with all my heart. And together we all take upon ourselves something, a gift for the Rebbe, in our own small way, in the number 121. And please God, we will merit to be reunited with the Rebbe, like in that story, right? The phone connection will come through. We'll be able to hear the Rebbe's voice, and the Rebbe will pick up right from where we left off. Pikol, and now, based on all this, because the Rebbe waits to hear something of significance from every... How are we doing with Mincha? Huh?
8 minutes ago.
L'chaim.
After